Home recording enthusiasts, the winter months are upon us, and I have a snowman Christmas sweater that I like a lot because it keeps me warm inside. Today I want to talk to you about a subject that is a little bit complicated in theory, but is super easy in practice. Today is Tuesday, December 6th. My name is Steph, and today I want to talk to you about phase. If you know anything about phase, or you've read anything about it, you know that in theory, it's a little bit complicated to talk about. There's just a lot of scientific jargon used to describe it. And I'm super down to talk about that at another time if you guys are interested in that sort of stuff. But today I just want to talk about the practice of it, because in practice it's actually super easy to get your phase relationships better if you just pay attention to it. Phase relationships are created when you are recording a source with more than one microphone. It refers to the difference in time that the sound hits those microphones. So for example, if you have maybe a guitar amp, and you have one microphone here and one microphone here, the sound is going to hit this microphone first, and then it's going to hit this one. And that seems like a pretty obvious thing to say. Like, of course it's going to hit the one that's closer. The problems can come into play if the sound hits those microphones at a different point in its wave cycle. This is sort of where we get into like the fuzzy territory that's almost scientific to talk about the way sound travels. But for the sake of just keeping this to the point, if the sound hits those microphones at a different point in its wave cycle, you're going to have some problems. And what happens sonically is that frequencies kind of cancel out, and you lose a bunch of body and low end that you might want. It's wise to check the phase relationship just to make sure that it's okay. Even if you're listening and you're like, yeah, this is sounding pretty okay, and then you check your phase, maybe you can make it sound even better, more clear. The good news is that during the recording stage, if you have phase problems, you can fix them. And that's like the most amazing thing about it, is that if you just check your phase, you can fix those problems, either by moving the mic or by using your polarity flip switch. And I'm going to talk to you about that in 1 second.
Not literally 1 second.
So here we go. Here are the 3 ways that you can improve your phase, or at least make sure that you're on the right track with your. Number 1, measure the distance from your source to your microphones. If you're recording with more than one mic for the purpose of having a good stereo image, one way to ensure phase is to measure from the source to those microphones. So for example, when I'm recording a drum kit, I'll measure from the snare drum to my overhead mics and make sure that the distance is equal. It doesn't really matter what the distance is, just so long as it's the same. A lot of times I use a cable, so I'll have the drummer hold the cable in the middle of the snare, and then I'll measure it up to the top, and then I'll kind of drag my hand over and make sure it's the same distance. Theoretically, this works because the sound source can then hit those microphones at the same time. And this works in practice too, which is really, really cool because science, baby. Number 2, using the 3-to-1 rule. The 3-to-1 rule refers to a situation where you are using more than one microphone because you want one close on the source and one that's picking up more of the room sound. So this rule goes as follows. When you place your close mic, make sure that your far mic is more than triple the distance as the first mic is. While this doesn't necessarily help the phase relationship, the significant drop in level minimizes the harmful effects of phase cancellation. Phase cancellation is kind of the most intense when the level in both mics are the same. So the thing to keep in mind here is either lower the level of that second mic or just like keep the fader down. Otherwise, this method is sort of obsolete. last way to improve your phase relationships is to flip the polarity. Alright, we're gonna get a little scientific here. Let me tell you a little bit about the way sound travels. Basically, you have these air molecules, and when one gets disrupted, it bumps into another one, and that one bumps into the next one. That is exactly how sound travels. When the air molecules are really close together, that creates a positive amplitude if you graph it out, and when they're further apart, that creates a negative amplitude if you graph it out. Back to polarity. Rather than phase, which affects the sound's relationship with each other because of a delay in time, polarity affects the relationship of those waves by flipping them 180 degrees. So all the positive amplitudes turn negative and all the negative ones turn positive. There's no delay in timing, just in the relationship of the waveforms. What this means sonically is if you have two signals and they're perfectly in phase, when you flip the polarity, they'll be perfectly out of phase. And likewise, if you have something that's perfectly out of phase and you flip the polarity, all of a sudden you'll hear all this body and all this clarity come back to those signals. If you hit the polarity button and you lose a bunch of body and clarity, that means your mics were in phase, yay! And you can deselect that button and you are all set and ready to go. If you flip the button and a bunch of body and clarity comes rushing back to you, your mics were out of phase, but they were perfectly out of phase. So what that means is you can leave that polarity button flipped. Now you have two signals that are in phase, so you are good to go as well. The thing to be aware of is if you flip that polarity button and not much seems to happen, that means that your mics are out of phase in a bad way. What I would do in that situation is suggest that you move one of the microphones. Depending on which program you're working in, what you're recording to, you may not be able to check to see which direction to move which microphone, and you kind of have to guess and just see if it works. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But you can also use the other two steps that I mentioned before to kind of help get you in the right direction. If you have something like Pro Tools where you can zoom in on the waveform super far, you could do that and see, okay, which mic is getting signal before the other one and vice versa, and you can sort of use that to your advantage in placing your microphones. That concludes the video for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please let me know. I know that it kind of gets confusing sometimes when you are sort of in scientific territory / trying not to be, so feel free to reach out. See you guys next week. Bye!